by, take a bite, and wander off.
forward
Thank you.
to there.
Oh, okay. Hi, Steve. Are you there?
Hello?
It's Steve Hendricks on the phone. Hello, Steve.
Can you hear us, Steve?
Yep.
Hello?
Can you hear me okay?
Awesome.
Yep,
Yeah, we can hear you now that I turned the volume up.
we're gonna get started here in just a minute.
Thanks.
Everyone quiet.
It's AVM, AVM,
AVM, okay,
for administrative V conflict. Oh, vacation, administrative vacation. AV.
Yeah, I think we're good. All right, so it's 2:03. We'll get started. First and foremost, I want to thank you guys for all coming today to our final impact meeting of 2018. Yeah, we appreciate all of you who have been able to come to all 3 meetings or 1 meeting or 2 meetings. So we do really appreciate that. It looks like we have Michelle joining online as well. So this last meeting, Melissa's going to take the reins and facilitate, and we're just going to talk through some of the things that we've learned, talk about some decisions that we need to make, and just get some final input from you all. We did share earlier last week and again earlier this week the data list of recommendations that have been brought up over the past 2 meetings. We imagine that to be kind of a living list. It's going to help direct us towards what our final data acquisition process looks like. So we appreciate any and all feedback that you've already given and that you may give in the future there. So otherwise, we have food and drinks, which it looks like you guys all have already dug into, so that's great. We'll just do quick introductions. I think everybody knows everybody, but we'll just go around the room. So I think you guys all know me, Jamie Kleinsorgia, and the leader for the Business and Community Impact team.
Pat Curry with the Exceed program. John Gulick, I'm County Engagement Specialist in Osage County and also part of Rob's Labor and Workforce Development team.
Sarah Lowe, Exceed and Associate Professor in Aggie Fund.
Joanna Reed Adams, State Community Development Specialist.
Steve Janetta, Community Development Specialist. Chris Fultru, CARES.
Chris Barnett, I'm with CARES, and I'm the Ag and Environment Impact Team Leader.
Yeah, my name is Michael Hardy, and I work for CARES also. I am leading up the Youth and Family Impact Team.
Angela Johnson, CARES, and I'm leading up the Health and Safety Impact Team.
Rob Russell, apparently I had to get the memo. This is the CARES side of the table. Labor and Workforce Development Program.
And Melissa Bartolome, CARES.
And then we have 2 folks on the phone, Michelle and Steve. Do you guys want to just introduce yourself real quick? Michelle waved. So.
I'll say hi real quick. Steve Hennis, State Specialist 4-H Center here on campus.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and just turn it over to Melissa, and she's going to get us started today.
So I'd like to keep this as casual as we can. We have a lot to get through. So pipe up if you have thoughts. This is not a shy group, so I'm not really worried about that. So goal of today's meeting is sort of to wrap up all that we've talked about and set some prioritizations for 2019 with all things Missouri. What are we going to develop? How are we going to make sure we have the right data? And then all the feedback techniques, I guess, we're going to employ and just make sure we're still on the right track 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the road. And I'm just going to turn red, so I apologize. I could feel it. So the agenda for today, we took at least a good hour in the meeting this morning with Ag and Environment talking about these cases. What we've learned is most important and why. We need to kind of sort through which we're going to prioritize, as well as that public-private distinction that we brought up, I think, at both of the meetings. What should be public, for county commissioners, for folks that are not part of Extension, and then what's the value add of Extension? Is it data? Is it certain tools? And we'll get there, and then take a break. And then we need to talk about data a little bit, and we won't go through the entire list. We've got some short exercises. We'd like you all to identify, okay, what's your top 3 to 10-ish? Our first group, definitely I exceeded 3, but just trying to understand from your perspective, what are the most important data sets in a few different areas, as well as we want to communicate with you guys what CARES does to prioritize data set acquisition. And then finally, just talking through some feedback and facilitation ideas, how our thoughts, we'd like to understand if we're on the right track there, but our thoughts on how we can make this kind of a fluid process. Instead of just being dictatorial with the technology we push out, again, checking back in 3 months and 6 months, who we need to be in contact with, making sure we're approaching this the right way that's useful to Extension. So let's jump right in. So use cases. So you guys have been part of at least 4 hours of conversation and email. We've also run a number of field studies. So we've reached out to Jenting, and I think emailed all the CESs across the state. We've got a number of people that replied, and we just kind of talked through their jobs, what data they thought was important, what tools that might be useful to them. Had some really good conversations there. We had an RD meeting, or met with the RDs last week and sort of proposed some things, and they had some opinions. Jamie's been training all over the state, these regional meetings, and soliciting feedback that way. We had a table at the summit. And then finally, leadership has a number of requests and back and forth with Chris about things that they think are important. So out of that culmination of data, the biggest use cases that we've heard are important. We kind of put into public and private. And the first one I'd like to talk with you guys about is sort of our basic public skinny area report, what we're calling the county council report. Just a brief introduction to an area, all public data, but around as much, I don't know, how we balance basic information with impact area information for the public. And we talked this morning with the Ag and Environment group, and they came up with a really interesting way to present it. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the district data sheets that we publish. It's like we can bring this up. Okay. But so they talked about having a skinny report that's 1 or 2 pages with big icons and like just an overview of a county or an overview of like a quad area with I'm not sharing. I'm sorry, Michelle and Steve. Thank you. Probably not the right I'll just bring up the district data sheet so we can have an informed conversation about that. So we have, this is what we call the district data sheets, that are really like simplified view with some basic data points. So something easy to digest, especially for our county commissioner or somebody in the public, that then could lead to that bigger report I was talking about with vulnerable populations and environmental factors and other things that we want to highlight. So our big question to you all is, in this publicly available report, what things do we need to consider? What things do we need to consider not having publicly available and having that extension value add later? Like, what do we need to be conscious of there? And team pipe up if I'm missing any big points.
I don't know if this is on point, but quick thing that just came to my mind, like the idea.
Yeah.
And I also, with my work plan and stuff that I'm trying to do, I'm trying to link it all back to the 3 target areas that Marshall Stewart set up. Would that be something that could be done here where the data that supports that would, I think, be helpful on the field to consistently be able to, if we could be referencing back to those 3 points and what we're doing and how the data reflects that, I think that would be helpful for me.
What was it? Economic opportunities, healthy future.
And then the students' education.
Yeah, okay. That's a great point.
When we were talking this morning, I think the thought was to frame it around something from each of the 4 impact areas. Maybe we need to have kind of
and actually,
both of those things.
And actually, my work plan, as I asked for input from the community, I did both.
Okay.
So I had that, but then I also had, okay, but our major goal, our target goal is this. And so I've tried to kind of say how it's involved with both. So,
Would anyone mind if I crack a window a little bit? I think it's going to get warm in here.
Awesome.
Down there too?
Yeah, that window there, right?
No, now, it wasn't my hot air that necessitated that. I was going to say,
Oh, yeah, hard to
Yeah,
open.
yeah. John, man, I tell you, as soon as I open my mouth, everything gets warm.
Vicky.
Thank you. What are those, you know, John, you know what those are called? It's kind of slipping my,
Well, the
yeah.
three were target,
strategic
but
something.
Right,
again,
okay.
the other were the, yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, there's a very much an overlap of them
Right.
because,
Right. So that is something that they're trying to push out more and just say, hey, we're listening. This is part of our listening.
well, and I
tour.
think if that's where we're moving,
Right.
having our formats being consistent with that, helpful.
Really good point.
Very good.
Yeah. We'll go back to the PowerPoint.
But the 2-page would really be great.
Right, that's the, we had been talking about that CES report,
Mhm.
and I think we were still envisioning something a little bit more detailed, and I think we've got a different way of doing that now. But I think what's really needed is something a little bit more brief and attention grabbing. That's the feedback that Jen Chang and Melissa got.
Yeah.
Feel. So,
Mhm.
that didn't come up in our impact team meetings, but I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Well, maybe,
It makes sense that it would come up in the field more
Yeah.
than here too.
Right.
That's why we asked you.
well, maybe there's 3 stages rather than just 2 stages. So there's the 2-page kind of introductory, catch their attention. Then there's the more intermediate, which might be the CES portion.
Mhm.
And then there's the third one, which is behind the scenes.
Everything else.
You know, so.
Yeah. Any other thoughts around that kind of skinny report? If it's just the 2 sections, maybe it's a little easier to tackle.
I personally think one of our challenges on that will be determining what goes in and what gets left out, because we're gonna have 10 thoughts of, 10 things we want to put in for every one that can make it through the space.
That's only if you
have
just
Yeah.
Right.
But I think we've got a few sort of header things right there. I think we need to come up with a straw man on that and float it around a little bit, especially to some of the field specialists.
But I really like that idea of framing it to address the 3 grand challenges. I mean, that's a kind of a unified framework. We can add some input from each of these impact areas. And then, we've also talked about other types of reports that will be publicly available, and whether that's a drag and drop approach, or there's an infographic component of that, or we, have the ability to make PDF, nice PowerPoint slides from our interactive reporting tool. There'll be other pieces that we can use for county councils, but having a distinct component that is a 2-pager printable thing that you can hand out, I think is what we are trying to get at here.
So it kind of depends on how vision you
So,
Right, exactly.
if you're going to be talking about extension expense for with technology, then the handout is network, then that might make sense. If it's more informational about their county than anything together.
Right. Yeah.
So Steve just said my statement was very self-serving, is what he was saying, so, which it was. So.
I mean, the thing is, and this, when I look at all things, it's very one of the things that I continually kind of struggle with is the lack of context over time. So, the numbers don't mean a thing if you don't know how they compare other places or how they reflect on what happened there. I was talking about, we were looking at Dare County earlier, but it was a good, they didn't touch 640 jobs over a period of time. They just spike up one, over 8 years and drop over 2. Was it a steady growth? Like, what's going on here?
So trend and like comparative information to either other counties or state averages or something like that.
Yeah. But just to describe that one topic in an infographic is extremely challenging.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are really good.
No problem.
But I think it goes back to what Chris was saying, that the real challenge is going to be figuring out what are the key pieces of data that are going to go.
Right. So in that vein, this list that we kind of pulled together demographics, workforce, vulnerable populations, natural resource, economic climate.
Those. She's looking at the light.
Don't call it a bun in the oven for no reason. So these areas, is this sort of a good direction for at least that, you know, handing off to, again, county commissioners, our sort of, our audience, and that's a great question that you brought up, like who is the audience is really going to determine this sort of skinny report. Are we headed in the right direction? And I know, you know, going forward in the future, Chris Barnett mentioned we're going to have a point percent for this and just field test it and see how it goes, see who it resonates with. Anything that we're missing from this list or we should be really conscious about adding?
What do you mean by economic climate?
Great question.
That could incorporate some of the trends or the types of economy that you have in the areas that agriculture dominated, is it, you know, manufacturing,
Okay.
things like that.
Maybe
employment type. Yeah, just basic statistics maybe at this area. Employment, unemployment.
get into the rural areas, a lot of people living.
Right. Anything
No, I
else
mean,
we should consider?
I was thinking like, what does the economic mix look like?
Right.
And part of, I'm part of this farm labor stuff, and a big part of the message I'm trying is like you're not competing with other farmers for labor right now. You're competing with Ivy and Craft Factory and Kirksville or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really hard to bridge away from simple indicators here to anything that would address economic base.
Right.
In other words, what's really driving the local economy.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably is better reserved for a
Deeper dive.
Yeah. Because we've got data that would tell us what sector of the economy, for instance, generates the most gross regional product in the county. But I think it would open up a Pandora's box of questions from people who are looking at it, because that gets to, it's a little nuanced in terms of where that data comes from. So I think the big picture indicators like has employment changed, some indication of how that compares with the region, something benchmark there.
Right.
Yeah. Workforce information critical.
Okay.
How do we step that down to 4 or 5
Basic,
key
yeah.
indicators?
Right.
I mean, there's
Any other thoughts before we move on? I want to be really conscious of time. 32:20.
Yeah, I'm wondering where would any kind of data that might have to do with, and I know housing, you get the kind of a nuanced part of this bigger picture. But that's another one where it seems like we've had a lot more requests and concerns about housing. And so that data is pretty at the county level, actually is pretty good. I don't know where that's like standing. Maybe it's in the demographics part of it,
Right.
but household structures and how that's changed over time, and then housing
Right.
are two others. I just hope there's something in here we can do. I mean, in most counties today, less than 50% of households, well, not most counties, many counties, like 50% of households are married couple families. And you tell that to people, and they're like, "Oh, I don't believe it," but it's, it's a demographic reality in a lot of places.
Yeah, the housing structure is also been a major topic of discussion among the youth and family group, as well as health and safety. Extension has a lot of programs for older adults, especially older adults living alone. So I think that's an important thing to consider for Extension, and we'll definitely have a lot of data around that in our reporting environment. But again, how we translate that to something that's distributable is
in a couple of
another question.
pages. Yeah, good stuff.
Right.
That's why we've always failed to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about starter maps a little bit, unless anyone has any final thoughts. You can always come back to this. So in All Things Missouri, and I'll pop over to the site just to refresh everyone, we have a few starter maps available, and this was a good way to introduce folks to the capabilities of the mapping room. And, we heard a lot of interesting criticism, especially around agriculture, and that always sticks out in my mind. What do you mean agriculture? Is it animals? Is it crops? Is it land use? And so, a big question we have is, well, one, the content of the starter maps, but more broadly, is it appropriate to give to the public? Is this and we heard from Ag and Environment, this might be a good introduction to what we do, some more basic information, and also we can really be thematic with it, and reach out to people more intentionally instead of just saying use mental health starter map, saying, asking them questions and getting more of a context around the data itself. So how are, and that's not a really good example, but how is my land being used, or what is my, questions like that to help introduce people to these maps. So I guess my first question is it still appropriate to serve to the public? Is this something that wouldn't be behind a paw print? And I think we heard from Ag and Environment this morning that, this is a good introduction into the capabilities of All Things Missouri. And my second question would be, okay, if so, what kinds of maps do we have? What sort of theme comes from the business and community group? Because there's a lot of different angles with this group.
Can you click on the starter map for business there and just show them what it does as a reminder?
Is this the only one we have for?
No, there's another one.
Okay.
And the way the way that, again, the Ag and Environment people were thinking about these maps was in terms of a specific question, which you mentioned. So, like, where is unemployment highest in my community might be something that we would ask, or what resources are there to serve unemployed folks in my community, something like that. So are those, what are the types of questions, if we want to go this route, what are the types of questions that we would want to frame that could be answered with a map, whether or not we have the data now?
For the public.
Right,
Yeah.
for the public.
Yeah.
So the whole purpose of the starter map is just to get them into the mapping with some data already loaded and maybe zoom to a certain area. And that's about it. Then if they're just in the mapping area. So asking the question like that does lead them to doing something in the map once they're in it. That's a good problem.
What about just something simple like job growth? Like in my region, which counties are creating more jobs and which are not?
And where people work. Just some very basic.
Yeah.
I like the idea of a growth because it gets to Rob's idea about the benchmark and the growth, and I'm just takes care of that.
Yeah.
But it's easier, it looks better on a map.
Right.
Especially if you set like some benchmarks that this is the, for your scale, like maybe this is the state average for growth. And
Yeah,
so
make the
above and
average,
below.
do one color below and one color above.
Yeah.
Definitely not airport.
Whenever I see a word like index, that just gives me a little bit of a chill, especially if you think about the, the public user. I don't think they, unless they are digging deeper to see what that index is.
Yeah, anything like that's way too complicated.
Yeah, although better market, worse market, that kind of gives people at least that range. I mean, I think indices are awesome as long as people sort of know what they're looking at.
I mean, I don't even know what the labor market engagement is.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't either. I know at one time
So keep the concept simple here.
Yeah.
Present a couple of starter maps or a handful of starter maps.
Pat, what are like the top couple things that people call you and ask for?
Yeah.
That would
well, God, there's so much variety. But the labor force stuff there's a lot
right
among
now.
the economic. We don't get a lot of public requests. Most of what we're getting are from economic developers or community leaders at some level, or we get them through some of our people in the So it's really kind of hard to generalize.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a tough one, yeah.
or it covers the water, but certainly among the economic development community, anything having to do with labor force is crucial.
Okay.
We just got the new site selectors survey. 2 of the top 3 indicators in site selectors decisions are labor force related. And the other is highway access.
So a simpler thing to do on labor force is like percent of college educated, or
Yeah, I think,
that would be something that's easier for people to
attainment.
understand than a labor market engagement index.
And so educational attainment, very, very important. That's kind of the first cut variable in a lot of economic development. Site selectors are looking at location, and that's with the target that Marshall said too.
Right.
Yep. Good point.
Another question would be good is how's our population changing?
Yeah, that's a crucial
Some
one.
basic things like that.
Yeah, employment and population change are that composite index thing that we developed. I mean, that just I get it probably hear from somebody every week, that's seen that or that is kind of going, this is really simple to understand, easy to use. So I think that those sorts of indicators are really good. Now, the time period here matters too. So we benchmarked all of that, for instance, against the recession and put it in the context of resiliency, looking at recovery from the recession. So I don't know, that's something else that we might want to consider. Yeah, because that's something, the use of that.
Or recovery since the recession.
Yeah.
If we're gonna do like employment growth or population growth, let's do it since the recession, because like a 1 year is meaningless.
I use 2007 for the thing that we do. And because Missouri was kind of interesting, you've got such a diverse economy across the state. You see those impacts starting to play out already in 2008 at some places. Most Missouri lagging indicators.
Right. So the purpose of the starter maps is to really lead people into interactive mapping. We find some people are timid to do that. So we got to have something inviting and simple. So I think I'm hearing the right things here. That
Well, I think more than just population change in terms of numbers, but also like diversity and race and ethnicity, those kinds of things are important.
you can see here we can put several layers in one of these starter maps.
Yeah.
So
does anyone have a suggestion for something with point data? Because I think for someone learning, I think that's why the airports is on there, right? Like it is nice to have something point data. What would be something that's point data that would be good for this audience?
Community side of things, we do have IRS data that shows like types of nonprofit organizations and, so thinking about community engagement and that kind of stuff, so different kinds. So it goes through like animal organizations, religious organizations, educational, those kinds of things, and those are all points.
Yeah. For community development, for the labor force, we also have all of your universities, 2-year trade schools, things like that.
Right.
Oh, that would be a good one.
Yeah, it would be. All the workforce centers, that infrastructure
I like that.
supporting the healthcare for higher education.
Yeah, we have hospitals, QHCs.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Do you guys have
That's a good variety.
traffic count data?
No, but I think that could be a thing.
So what?
Well, I've got it. It's I don't know how eager they would be for us to use it, but I've got the guy who handles all that I know really well.
So one of the things to keep in mind is
that would be extraordinary to have.
So I think one of the things to keep in mind though is that what we're offering up with these starter maps is what we consider to be public. There's things like that we're wanting to have you guys think about putting that behind a paw print, right? Because that's a value add for John to go into his community and say, I have this map, this is what it means, this is what we should be thinking about as a community, in terms of strategies moving forward. So just to try to help kind of flatten this conversation just a tiny bit, we're thinking about what's going to be more public, what's going to be more of our front facing versus, what's going to be behind the paw print. Yeah. Right, exactly. Right.
Traffic maps are public, though. Traffic maps are public.
Yeah.
They are, but not in a digital format going back to 1985.
Well, no, let you find it.
Yeah, you can go look at the They got them all online, where you look at the status map.
No.
The US has,
Yeah.
DOT has some stats, but it's just for the major roadways, I think, around like vehicle miles traveled.
Yeah, well, we have the whole detailed
Yeah.
data set. It's really, we use it all the time.
Yeah.
The other thing is we think through mapping. I was trying to see if I could find this. I can't. Like America, of course, produces a ton of maps and things like that. So we want to make sure that we are assessing what they already have available, and we're not just like replicating the same map or doing that the same tool.
Right.
Because they also have access to a lot more data than we do.
Right.
They curate the data. Again, I'm trying to look at their website, and it's not a great website, not easy to follow.
But yeah, but you're right. They
That's,
get the quarterly sense of employment and wages without suppression.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not bigger.
Yeah. Got a lot of good ideas to start here. So that's a good segue into some different things that might be behind that conference. So we had talked pretty heavily last time, and maybe the time before even, about a CES report. So having something curated for CESs and then talking with people in the field, talking with the RDs, talking with you guys, it's kind of become apparent that, well, Missouri is a diverse state. I mean, it's all over the map, and making a, business and community report that serves all the CESs and all the areas, and urban and rural and poorer regions, richer regions, is not something that we are comfortable facilitating. So sort of a hybrid idea that I think Jamie brought up was a drag and drop report. So having a baseline and set of indicators for a report, and then allowing a CES or a field staff or whoever to come in and curate different reports. So this is a good report for an urban area around horticulture or something, and then having them behind a paw print share out to other CESs and other field staff. So that is sort of where we landed with that. So I'd like to get some thoughts and feedback. We'd like you guys to be the experts. We're not content experts. We can get data and build tools, but this should not be the tutorial coming from CARES saying you have to use this. We think this would be kind of the best approach to make sure that the experts are doing what they do best. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and part of our thinking behind this was really just that, we put together the 4 impact area reports to the best of our knowledge, right? But what we've learned from you all is that it's just, there's so many indicators that cross all 4 impact areas that we would have a lot of duplication if we kept it in its current form. And also, as Melissa said, there's just so much variance that we would never create a report that would meet all business and community needs, right, for every area. So having something that is more flexible, where we would have maybe 2 or 3 indicators populated under each category, so some baseline demographics, some really baseline economic type of stuff, but the rest of it would all be customizable by the user, I think is where we've landed, just because we realize that there's not a cookie cutter that fits any one impact area very well. So.
The other thing that we talked about this morning was the possibility of, if, John puts together a report with his 25 items in there that he likes and states it, that you could potentially share that report out as a template. You've done it for your county. Somebody could take your template report and say, that's the best template we've got for every county. They'll go use it in their county, and their person in their county. And
we can do an internal rating across the street.
I had a moment there. It was a dream.
Yeah, we had comment.
Never read a comment.
Actually, I was thinking it wasn't going to be me, so he just. But I think that idea where getting it out there where then other people would be able to respond and say, why didn't you do this, or why didn't you do that?
Or they can take your report as is and add in their 3 more indicators and use it for their meeting they got coming up.
I think this kind of helps also, because we know that there are people who will probably really get into this, and there will be other people who just don't have the time. So if there's something out there that somebody else built that they can just take and still use, then it's a value, right? So it kind of is, check a couple of boxes that way.
And also you mentioned there's a map gallery potential. I think that's
Yeah.
something that, for the value add behind the paw print, here's a map gallery, the best that can be replicated. So if you create a map showing something to your county, somebody else can take it and go to Saline County or whatever other county. Likewise with the report, the idea of an ongoing governance group, I'm kind of stealing the thunder from the last slide of the day to this point now, is a governance group could help curate what is the most appropriate 3 to 5 templates. So we're not having a mass of stuff that people need to wait. That's an idea.
Yeah.
Slide back here, where'd that slide go? One thing that, Melissa, I wanted to make sure and point out, we're on that section that says behind paw print, but what we're really talking about is items that may have a little bit more restriction to them. So it's not just paw print and university people and login. We're also lumping into this area things that are potentially subscription type items. So if we develop a tool that we say, hey, this is going to be, we're going to charge people so much per year to access that tool, or it's something you develop for a class that they pay for the class fee and get access to that as part of the class. That's the area we're talking about here. So it's not just paw print access. One of the other concepts we talked about this morning is paw print access too broad for some of these things that we're talking about here. Do we need to have a subset of university people? Right now, technically, paw print, as I understand it, would be all 4 campuses could access this. Maybe we need to limit this extension, or perhaps within extension limit just pools of people that would get access to some of these items. So that's another whole debate, but I think it's a good concept that we need to make sure we build into this, right?
It would seem that extension admin folks would have some idea of whether they see this as a revenue producer, I guess. That's kind of the whole notion. If they're investing in it, and so they'd like to get a return on that.
Right.
Jamie?
Yes.
This is Steve, and I'm following the conversation and just really in agreement with what I'm hearing in terms of using the categories and the language that we are using within extension, and then the use of infographics and visuals is really helpful. At risk of adding another layer of complexity, I'm just wondering if the group has given more thought to the community capitals framework as another way to structure information, and perhaps it being organized with specific indicators that would say represent cultural capital for this county, financial capital, et cetera. And just sort of wondering out loud, if that's an option, if that would allow groups to, categorize in more of an asset-based way what is going on, and how that fits within maybe, visioning and planning processes that might be going on. So I don't want to muddy the waters, but just was kind of thinking out loud if that's still a possibility, or if the group sees some merit in including that option.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for bringing that up. And this is something that we've talked about before, and since we've sort of abandoned the idea of having just a preset community and business and community report, I think that would be a really great example of something that the business and community future team, whatever that looks like, could work together through the drag and drop report option, right, to put together a report that really follows that community capital framework. So it's not something that we have necessarily baked into what you're seeing here in our slides, but it's definitely not something that we've forgotten about, because I know it is a priority specifically for the CDCESs.
Actually, all of them.
All of them. Okay, yeah. So yes, that's, thank you for bringing that up. And I think that with the flexibility of the drag and drop report, we would be able to categorize the report.
We don't
based
even
on,
know what those
yeah.
Right? That would be, I was thinking,
Yeah.
Perfect.
But it is a really great framework that, can be used across all the impact areas, and that can be stood up as, one of those templates like what we were talking about. Yeah.
No, that's what I was asking. really a template, or is it something that we would tag, as a, to categorize each data set or indicator as, hey, this belongs in this asset group?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that works. We need to think through that though. If you let it be too flexible, then I'm worried that people are gonna miss things that they would, you know, because they're not gonna know to even search for things that exist.
So for our purposes, we're gonna want something pretty specific.
Yeah.
So, but at some point, not right now.
Yeah, I mean, right now
Probably
it's
a template
right now
for
it's
this way,
a template or a framework,
Yeah.
and then I think we will tag maybe 3 or 4 variables for each thing, as opposed to, because you could get into a thing like employment change, you could tag that as like 6 of the 7, you know what I mean? Like, so there's that situation. So,
That's true.
so I think what we're thinking of is identifying a couple things for each part of the framework.
It has to be specific enough to be meaningful and have this sort of broad agreement that these indicators represent, this category. But I really like that idea of kind of an asset profile, and being able to see, several different things at a county level or even more local that kind of represent, one of those categories or buckets. I think that would help people not only, grasp what's going on, but maybe think more creatively about how to engage those assets.
Yeah, well, see, some of those indicators are likely to not be all that useful locally, simply because they're going to be pretty broad. But we'll be, we should be able to do something more detailed in the programming work that we do, to assessments and other kinds of stuff. We can get a more finite picture of what our programs are doing and how they might be affecting us.
And I'm almost wondering if we sort of take some of our community needs assessment for the action agency approach, where it might end up being more of a template in the sense that for the CNAs that we do, we have indicator placeholders, basically. So those are things that would have to be collected locally. So things that we would never have a state or national level data source to fill in, right? But the local folks would be able to fill that information in and feed it up to the larger report that way. So again, we can still create the framework for it or a template for it, but it would rely a lot more on the individual level CES or whomever is in the community to kind of fill in some of those very specific local indicators. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that approach kind of helps prompt people not to forget that stuff, right?
Right, yeah.
Because it's in there, but it's just as a blank page thing, must be collected locally.
Yep, yep. I think that gets at things like what we had talked about in our last meeting too, around like childcare facilities and stuff like that, that we just may not be able to get a reliable, source that reports that on a regular basis, and that includes both licensed and certified and religious and all of those aspects, because that's that in and of itself we know is a very important indicator to the community, but there's not really a good way for us to go about collecting it unless we do it at a local level.
Or by business.
Right, yeah, right, or by, yeah, which is still a possibility, and I think that's something that we did talk about in the ag group, is that when we get to the data portion, we're not opposed to purchasing data, we just need to prioritize and, exactly, those types of things, so, anyway.
Well, Chris mentioned the map gallery idea. I don't think we need to spend too much time there unless people have thoughts. But again, having folks within Extension curate maps and kind of, if we do a ranking system, I'm not sure how that will work, or just use, most used or something really basic to kind of percolate those up, or have somebody curate. That seems to resonate now with 2 groups, which is great. Something that we've heard a lot from the field, especially from the RDs, is data for decision makers. They want it. They all want it.
There you go, Pat.
What about that, Sarah?
I work for you. It's really on your shoulders.
That's great. Yeah, I hadn't heard that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Again, that would be in the Cochrane area or subscription area. However we want to treat that, I don't know if it's essentially revenue generating, or if it's something, once we're talking about subscription, we're talking about opening it up to people off campus then. Versus Paw Print, it would remain on campus or just with an extension. Something. I don't know what direction we want to take that, and I don't know that that's a mature conversation yet. We just
When they mentioned that, did they talk about the interpretation? Because it's one thing to put the data out there, but the problem is, do they know what it means, or are they going to use it correctly?
Well, that's exactly, the program, the way it's delivered now, is a very comprehensive walkthrough of key indicators. However, and here's the challenge is that, of course, when I'm doing one of these things, constantly sifting through, as we all do when we do our work, what really matters and what doesn't. So you look for the biggest deviations from what your, say, peer counties or places are experiencing. And so there's quite a drill down so that we really don't put 40 slides out there. We want to put 15 or 20 slides that really say something meaningful. And so that's the difficulty. So there's kind of almost like an AI part to this that I don't know that we ever get past. But
I don't imagine that the people who are saying this have thought that through. And it may be that we have to do something more basic and then
that's what I'm thinking.
put Pat's phone number next to it.
No. And Sarah's. I want her to be in this loop.
I wonder if there's an opportunity to think about what are some foundational data sets that are part of the data for decision makers that we could put behind a paw print, right? That people could have access to. And the minute that they want to know more, learn more, do more, right? That's when they engage with you to have to
well, or if you type to a subscription,
right?
You would have it say, okay, you get access to this through your subscription, but the first thing you do is you go through a course, a training course,
right?
And then you get access to the data. So there's all kinds of ideas.
So General Homes used to do something like this years ago. I did about 80 presentations a year.
Well, one of the things that we did do 85. Well, and John knows this because he sat through these data for decision maker training. So, been 2 years ago now, we actually did a training. We distributed those spreadsheet-based databases. So we had nearly 30 presentations spawned out of that effort. So that gives us some idea, I think, of the demand that might be out there. Now, those were typically shorter presentations, very simple, mostly looking at population change, total jobs, employment. So they were key indicator type programs.
That may be what we have to do.
So here's what I think. I think if there's a lot of demand for this, this is great. Then I think we do, 20 slides or something, and let's do a training of a handful of CED, CES, maybe one in every extension region, so that one person in every extension region could go to the extension counselor, could go to the county commissioners and explain the trends, explain the data. And then we don't have Pat driving all over the state.
Well, I wouldn't anyway. Well, that's what we talked about this Monday in our staff meeting.
Yeah.
One of the things
But
we need to do.
That seems like the win-win. Put together this, you guys do the data for every county, like for 15 things or something. So any CES could get the data, but then we could train one person in each extension region to go interpret the data, help them understand the data,
also serve as that point when they have questions that they can follow it back to whoever.
I think the difficult part about this is benchmarking, so that that's what makes this that's what gives us traction in front of a group of people, is that they're not just seeing a number for tracking what's happening with them. People start immediately thinking competitively, especially in the because a lot of this we do in front of economic development organizations. So if they see that they're 15th on a list of 16, they're all of a sudden like, whoa, what? We better be paying attention. So that's, I think, that part of this is, we've talked about this a lot, Chris, about
we could bake in rankings or Z-scores or things like that into, I don't know if you have it like pre-populated in your data, but it can actually be baked into the report so that you've got that calculation there. And you could even spit out, so here's where you're doing the best out of the 20 indicators, and here's where we're doing the work. So that could be, you know, an easy potential thing that we can build into our next phase. And then depending on what the demand is, that could be something we talk about going to subscription in the future.
Yeah, well, that's going to be my question, is are we talking the first year about something that's really a paw print thing, accessible to extension, and not really a subscription yet? Or are we still thinking, or are we thinking there is subscription potential here?
I mean, I think there's a potential for subscription, but I'm also thinking if I'm Marshall, I want, or like, I mean, I'm providing leadership for these CEDCESs. I want all of them to have all of this information. I just think that's what Marshall should pay for. I think Marshall should just pay for them to all have that information.
And that's part of the All Things product fund, where it's going to be available to extension for the state of Missouri. But where do we get into subscriptions outside, or what is All Things for other states?
Where's the line? Do we have the economic groups buy subscriptions to this or not? But,
right. Well, even like the Missouri Economic Development Council, I really believe
I think they would.
I think there's a
so we have Marshall pay for it for the CEDCES, and then everyone else pay for it.
Well, I guess, and I apologize because I'm double tasking because I can't triple task. The thing is I'm not sure about the conversation around subscriptions. I don't think subscriptions have anything to do with extension proper, unless I'm missing something.
But I know that extension wouldn't pay the subscriptions. We're talking about like economic development.
Yeah, like Pat was saying,
would pay.
So like the RPCs, Jamie, you were out there last week and they loved it. They wanted to. So to the RPCs, what are you suggesting? I apologize.
No, I think that they would pay. Absolutely.
I think there's a certain basic set of resources that we want to make available through our CES system, just about anybody that wants to progress. But if you were getting into the
if they want the CEDCES to go and answer questions or help them, then that's
so we make it free to the CES or whoever in extension, and they can access the information. They can go to the councils and give that to them for free, or the councils can pay a subscription and have access to it themselves. That's the basic path to the data.
I think that's right.
I gotta
What do you think, Pat?
I gotta go to a meeting.
I'm
meeting with my probation and parole officer. Fulton, so I figure you guys are all creative, and I'd like to see your explanation about why I'm meeting with them. So you can send me, that's your bonus question today. Why am I meeting with probation and parole in Fulton?
We'll add that to your report that you save and all that.
I'll follow up with an email. Yes, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
So I think that's some good decisions around this data for decision makers.
Are we decision makers?
Are we making
decisions?
Okay.
So some similar conversations this morning around the ag site tool. That's also something we've heard maybe in all of the impact area groups, definitely with several folks in the field. Several folks in the summit came up and said, is this going to be part of All Things Missouri? And so we had a similar conversation around what's paw print, what's subscription, and this is something that we need to talk with Ray Massey about how to move this forward, but we're pretty positive.
Is it subscription right now?
No, it was risk
That's what I
management
thought, but I wasn't sure.
a few years ago. They funded it, and one of the stipulations was successful. Right. Well, it was successful we've gone way past the term they specified it to be successful. One of the concerns that was brought up this morning was, okay, who within extension gets access to that? They had an example of, should the extension, if we put it behind property, should the county extension secretary at the desk there be able to, go in, draw the boundary and print out one of these reports for any farmer that comes in? And at first we're like, then what if the farmer's asking for not his farm, but the neighbor's farm, or 3 farms over, and wants 20 reports and all this? What do we do? What's the reasonable access to things? I think you would have some of that same question, better questions around it. Data for decision makers. Do we need to be concerned about limits? If people are paying subscriptions for this, what are they having access to versus other people not having access to that aren't subscribing? And is that setting up extension to treat entities unequally and so on? That was discussion we had this morning around ag site that
Mhm.
we might want to think about it. On any subscription item we start putting forward as
Yeah.
don't know if that
Yeah, I don't have.
worries you or not, but,
Well, I think it's a pretty awesome resource. I even go there often when we're working in the county and.
oh, you do, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
gotta keep it going, yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked about the fact that some of the, I mean, there's obviously people out there like bankers and others that would definitely pay for the reports. And whether we should charge per report or for like a monthly or an annual subscription. So, if you guys have thought about that too.
Also, if like nonprofits and stuff like that,
Right.
get a
A government rate versus like a for-profit business rate sort of thing.
And we were kind of leaning toward handling that with the Nexus discount codes rather than specifying different rates, but we could go either way.
Yeah, that's one other thing around this. We're still in conversations with
Sit next to us.
American Eagle about developing these subscription pages, and they're not going to be ready January 1 or anything. So, it's going to be a little while before we get into the subscription.
So the next thing that, well, already in development for a platform with similar technology is that we need a data uploader tool. Folks want to upload their local data. We're thinking of piloting this with Terry Folks group with the after school care. But some big questions around this is data curation and data sharing. So if we're sharing with an extension and somebody grabs her data and uses it and finds something wrong with it, or we publish it, then we really need to think very hard about how we're going to handle this. Is all data just personal? You upload your data and it's yours and that's it, which, you know, is useful in one context, but not in many. So,
I think there's a lot of difficult questions around that. I've dealt with that at USDA.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of legal trouble.
Okay.
So certain agency, like housing, uploaded all the apartments that get USDA money to lower the rent. And then there was legal trouble. Someone said, well, I don't want my apartment on there. And then the lawyers found out that they don't have to have their apartment on there. And it got to where basically so this is the same sort of thing, it was a mapping kind of thing. And it got to the point where USDA basically pulled down anything that was like remotely questionable because it was just such a nightmare. Anything that might have a lawyer attached to it.
Well, then certainly there's concerns around FERPA and DIPA information.
Yeah. And I will say too, as a researcher, I love it. I of course post all my data and stuff, and I love it when people come back to me and say you missed something or you interpreted that wrong. And that's a real good thing about having data posted. The flip side is sometimes I'll get grad students have been asked to replicate a paper or something, and they're badgering me constantly. Like it gets to be a real problem. So I wouldn't want someone to post, you know, their after school program data and then be, you know, badgered or, you know, I don't want the CDCES to be just inundated with questions about. I don't think it would happen like on a mass scale, but like maybe one person really, you know, with a lawyer. Just throwing those couple things out there. I think I have no answer for you.
So you're saying we should refer to researchers?
I think we just need to have some kind of disclaimer as
yes,
and be careful about what
we need to source things.
Right, yeah, I mean, if it's just metadata, and if it's
Right.
internal to extension, I think that's one very different thing than, you know, making it publicly
I think
available.
the disclaimers are key, and also we need to keep a close eye on how we're getting feedback and questions from extension property in the state of Missouri in terms of being able to address that. We have no bearings at this time, but we've got to really keep on top of that.
I think that this is another opportunity for training and data literacy, you know, education as well, to say you can't have access to the data upload tool until you go through a training that talks about what is the governance around personally uploaded data, why is it important to associate proper metadata and all of that kind of stuff, you know, and it's also important to make those notes that, you know, this is a you know, a community data set that I collected just by driving through a town versus this was used, you know, this was a, you know, an instrument that was developed in conjunction with, you know, for a grant or whatever it may be, right? And make sure that we're having that sort of notation, you know, especially among extension folks, and, you know, making sure that they feel comfortable doing it. Just so you guys know, from what I have heard from the folks that I've been training and such, is that a lot of this stuff is really simple. Like, they want to see, like, where they're doing their programs, right? They just kind of want to see, like, where where are their gaps, where should they maybe have a new program placed, or you know, those types of things. So, but I do know that that's step one, and maybe 2-3 years down the road, people are going to get more sophisticated and want to do some higher level data collection or incorporation. And so setting them up for success now through training could probably be one way to go about it.
Also, if we want to have some, if we're branding this under MU extension, we want to make sure that there's standards for the quality of the data that's there, and that needs to be reviewed, and then you get an IRB issue.
Well, I'm wondering if, while we may allow data upload for extension folks, we don't allow any extension folks themselves to make it public data. That it always has to go through some sort of review, like you're saying, first by CARES or somebody in extension.
Right.
That would be a gateway to making it public. You may be able to still upload it and keep it to yourself, or upload it and share it with other people in extension, and that's fine. That's a different thing. That's considered more internal. What do you guys think of that idea?
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering what you mean by public, because right now, if I have a map, I can share the dynamic link, which has all the metadata embedded in it. So I click on Boone County, and it shows me, like, you know, private, low-income housing or something, and it shows me the addresses of all the places in Boone County. So is that public? If I share that with Angela, I mean, she could share that out to the world. Is the extension still on the hook?
I don't know. You're right. I was thinking more in the interactive mapping, where you wouldn't be able to access certain data sets if you weren't logged in with your partner.
I see. Okay.
But you're right. You can still capture a map image of that and send it out to the world in your email and things like that. We don't have complete control over how everything that's in your area might get distributed. And it might be back to what Jamie was saying. Maybe there's some training issues involved there.
Yeah.
That wouldn't worry me.
Yeah.
The static.
Yeah.
One,
That would worry me.
the metadata wouldn't be accessible.
Exactly. Any PII would be very.
So,
Okay.
clearly there's more stuff to be thought through there, but I kind of like the idea of having a curation process or an approval process before it gets more broadly accessible to just extension.
Right.
How's that?
I mean, I think that makes sense to me. And it's not just curated, it's also, it's collecting data. I mean, that was IRBs in the past, you know, you don't want the IRB to get a hold of this map and be like, why is this approved and all that, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't really care that much about it.
I know, but you don't want them to either.
Yeah.
You could even have a course on Canvas, integrate it all.
Thanks, Melissa. You're welcome. That sounds good.
Any other concerns on data upload or needs for data upload that you want to avoid?
So just to throw it out there, I don't know if this would be useful. So again, to frame this, what we're describing here are priority use cases that we've heard, and the purpose is to actually put these in a proposal for building out. So another way we've used data upload in the past is kind of as a site selection tool. So you, a client or whoever could upload a set of points. You get a report back that describes the area that intersects those points. So it's like AgSite, but there could be other applications for that type of tool.
Yeah, you could.
So,
Kind of
upload
mirror.
service area.
there are going to be a lot of researchers that are going to say, put your data, our data here, not too.
Yeah.
Not generally interested in that. But there is possibility that, somebody working on a project that may be funded by a research grant might want to do that to have their data interact with other data. They wouldn't necessarily be interested in making it.
They want to keep it to themselves.
Yeah.
Most of the econ journals actually do make you make your public data can replicate it.
At
So,
the point
like,
of
I would,
publication.
yeah, like, once the journal article's out, I would for sure upload
Mhm.
data that I had that I could
And by that point, the data's been
vet it.
vetted and.
Yeah, then you can say it's been peer
Written
reviewed.
about it, there's some metadata around it and all that, then it could be.
Yeah.
Public.
Okay. The last thing we'll talk about in terms of what Angela mentioned, like things that we're really keen on building in 2019, is the idea of a sharing folder, which we've hinted at a little bit with the drag and drop report and the map gallery, and just having these resources shareable with an extension.
Yeah.
And so something that we didn't get to talk about this morning, but I would like to know, because I'm a developer here, so we're sharing maps and reports, what other sorts of things might we need to share with an extension? So we've heard in the field, people are interested in sharing presentations or other papers that they're citing, or some, some state extension veterinary information that gets disseminated. They'd like to have that up in a repo with data. Other things that we need to consider there, especially if it's all behind a paw print, is that we have the same sort of considerations with data upload and things, or does it matter as much?
We've heard, like PowerPoint slides too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as long as it's behind a paw print, it'd be great to have that. It'd be so much easier to be able to do that than emailing stuff out or box.
Or are we talking about something that's like a box then?
Right.
Because I don't know that we need to overlap with services that are already there. But it's great to have this option as part of All Things Missouri where you could share things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I'm conflicted about this because I don't want to sit there and be a replacement for Fox.
Right. But if it's tied into.
But if it's tied to a project or tied to your work, I can go away.
Yeah, something that it would be tied to a place would be interesting to see if, and I think of some of the work we've done, where we've done regional and then worked within a county and then within a community in a region. It would be kind of interesting to just, or useful, I think, to have all of that, all of our output for those projects.
Right.
So if somebody's going to go work in those counties, they at least can see.
So you're tagging things with the county or organizing that way.
Or project name.
Yeah, make it findable.
As a new person in the university, I'll say that Box is really annoying because you guys all have these accounts that you already established, and then I'm the new person, so I don't have access to anything.
Right.
Whereas if it was something like this, that anyone in an extension, like if you have an extension paw print or something, you can go. Yeah, like today I got a call from some media about something in Benton County, and I was like, oh, good, I have some stuff, Patches did some stuff in Benton County, so I can go look at that. But I'm new. I don't know anything about any counties, so, but that would be awesome if you could just go and, here's what Extension has done lately in Benton County. And
I'll tell you, even if you've been here a while, Doc.
It's going to be replaced eventually because Chris and I coordinate on documents in Box. It does not sync automatically. There's a delay time and wait. I don't have the updated version of this document, and we're constantly going to the website, forcing the sync, unlinking, and it's a mess.
Well, we've already talked to you guys about the mapping too. Like we'd like to have a place where we can share shape files and just
something else where we have a repository of at least the geographic information, if not other information too, that could be directly accessible by the researchers rather than going through the All Things Missouri website. I mean, it's still kind of under the umbrella of All Things Missouri, but it's internally accessible like a Box drive. And that may be where these folders find it.
I do like the idea of having something that's more organized by geography. I don't think that's necessarily something that we've thought about doing before. Like everything that's been created for Benton County could be in a Benton County folder that people could
or not even a folder though, but the best part of this is the tag kind of situation.
Well, that's
right.
That's
like
kind of
the folder in Box. That's the Box thing. Is the folder.
Right.
But if we could get to some sort of situation where we could tag things as Benton County and Wealth Creation. And rivers.
Right.
That would be awesome.
With the date range on it, 1990 2000.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've, Genting and I have been running these usability studies on All Things Missouri and the maps and reports. And so many people go into that search data box and start typing in Springfield, Missouri. Like they just want everything about a region.
Yeah.
And that nothing comes up.
Right.
Because it's not a county.
They didn't organize that. Well, no,
Yeah.
not that.
Oh,
They didn't
okay.
organize by, unemployment.
Right,
or
right.
Ag land,
Yes,
whatever.
have it for
And
free.
so,
They can't
for
even,
Springfield, Missouri, we've got 10,000 data sets.
Right.
Right, yeah, you have to filter by
But
something.
they haven't heard anything because not everything's tagged with
Right.
Springfield, Missouri.
So I think though, the one thing to keep in mind, and you went right where I was going, Sarah, is that we've learned through past systems that getting people to tag stuff is
Yeah.
like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
So,
So we have it by region, we already know.
right, well, we just need to, as a team, we would need to think through how we can prompt people correctly to get them to tag it.
Yeah.
And that it can't be saved until it has at least
tag.
one tag that's associated with geography and with maybe, like the topic area, or the impact area or something like that, because.
Yeah,
And- and,
but I mean, looking around, is that an okay thing to do? Because we don't want to create impediments and barriers to just
Right.
clicking say I'm
Right.
done.
Well, a lot of people don't really
No, I-
understand the logic of tagging. so.
Right,
Right.
Really?
yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
generational thing too. I mean, some folks, the younger people tag 10 things, but
So, you know what I see as the analogy? So as a researcher, when I publish my journal article, the editor, I get to pick the keywords and the social media tags and all that kind of stuff. I do my best on that because that leads to my citation count. And the higher my citations, the better my annual review. So can we do it kind of like that? Like, hey, Pat's stuff is getting tagged a lot. Let's give him a bonus, or you know what I mean? Like, wings heavy,
Well, then people would have an incentive to put their stuff up there too.
Yeah.
If they don't tell
Yeah.
people like that.
Yeah.
So more than just the Amazon 4-star rating.
Yeah.
Although that's good.
Yeah.
but that's interesting. Tag by geography, they'll never be really powerful.
I think it'd be
Yeah.
super cool.
All right,
and-
so just to say, with
Yeah.
our engagement portal, a lot of people, all of their work
Yeah.
is just Missouri.
Yeah, they're tagged with
Yeah.
Missouri.
Which is
That doesn't help.
All,
Yeah.
all
So you
of
get,
the
if you search
extension,
Springfield, you won't find it.
all of the extension programs, thinking about the engagement portal, everyone has just tagged it Missouri.
But we won't have Missouri as an option.
No, no
Yeah.
option.
Because even the statewide program, like
There's all things
a legislator will say, that doesn't, it's 5 counties maybe, and they call it a statewide program. Am I fair?
You're right.
Well,
So-
so we'll need to spend some time thinking through it. That's basically what I'm trying to say, is that I love those direction that's heading. We just need to be somewhat prescriptive and also
Yeah.
be willing to help people learn, how and why it's important to tag. So, but I like the incentive. I like thinking about it as an incentive, for performance reviews and those kinds of
And
things.
let's talk with Blake about this. We're going to be meeting with Blake December 11th, I believe, to go over a summary of all the impact teams. And we should talk with him about how we engage the field faculty, et cetera, around providing incentives, or is this a thing that you need to complete, et cetera. I mean,
Ice cream coupon.
pardon me?
Yeah.
Bus ice cream.
Yeah. But the main thing is, just like the earlier meeting we were running with the ag and natural resources environment, is we don't have a sense of what is appropriate or what is going to send off alarm bells in the field. So we really need that guidance in terms of what is appropriate or what's
Yeah.
reasonable.
Right.
Well, these guys are getting lots and lots of things put up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Lots. Crazy.
It's- Maybe we can introduce this after year 1. And then year 2, we're going to be adding this, so they're not really.
Couple of things they do need. One is something that helps them map out their networks and something that supports their assessment. Because they asked to do both.
Steve, you shared that document with that email with me before about, it's not people to people, but organizations that they relate to from a network standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest example is the emergency management program. We have basically a legal obligation to support emergency management in every county in the state now. We have a contract. And Connie is our coordinator for that, Connie Brown. And every county is supposed to have an emergency management program and team by law, and about 2/3 actually do. Everybody has one. They're not actually.
And so, and we're part of those teams in every county. And so our CES is simply by default, they're part of those teams. And we don't want them running emergency management programs, but what we can do is you know, use our networks to support things. And by putting, when an emergency happens in their county, they're not going to be able to access this stuff. But we can access it from campus, or somebody in the regional director's office can do that. So they can get phone numbers and all those other kinds of things when they need it. Or, and that's just one component. But you can build around different kinds of themes they might be working with in terms of what are our economic development networks, or more granular in terms of who are the folks we're working with that are really interested in supporting entrepreneurship, food, or leadership, or any of the things we're working on.
Or imagine we've got the core and the periphery, or kind of different levels of core to the core. Where Marshall, when he first came, he had that diagram where we do what we do best, and then we partner with the rest. Is there a technology framework where you could invite the partners may lead and essentially help facilitate, but they would have access to a network that's very specific.
In some places they would need to do that, in other places probably not be as big a deal. But yeah, I wouldn't be as concerned about how they get the data to build it out, because like we have the new person in Jefferson County, she can't do that herself. She's going to need collaborators to help with that, but it's one way she can go out and start to build those relationships. Yeah. So it has to be pretty simple.
Yeah.
But something that they can use for analyzing where their networks are strong, who can do what in their networks.
Right. And that's something we talked about with the youth and family group, I think. Yeah. And there was, yes, there's that need, but then I'm being a little contrarian, but how do we keep that up to date?
Well,
so a CES
that's
lead.
kind of it's their tool.
Yeah.
It's not
Okay.
our tool. It's theirs. Our folks, I think that's included in their evaluation. They're not keeping it up. I don't know how they could be effective as CES if they don't have a good idea who they're networking.
Right.
But I think it's going to be more than just this. From my area, like with folks, it's more than just like what's your network look like, but it's how are you leveraging that. To
Right. Well, I mean, that's
one
one
thing
thing
I
they
keep trying to talk about.
How do you measure that?
Yeah, you can't measure that. Yeah, and that's I don't want people to be like, oh, okay, well, I've filled out my whole chart here,
Right.
I've got this complete network, but then I don't have any programs happening. We don't know what's going on economically here. So it's a
So
tool
the
that.
CES role, though, is less about programming and more about infrastructure for your local community. And so the program
should be.
on top of that.
Yeah. But again, it's still about the leveraging the network to actually.
Yeah, in about 2/3 of the regions, it'll be pretty strong. We know that. The other third, probably not. They don't.
Yeah. I think one of the things more broadly, we just have to, so going back to the tagging conversation, there's been several parts of this, like how much are we allowing crowdsourcing, open source sort of data, all this sort of stuff versus how much control. And that's a much bigger conversation that I think has to occur too about.
Open source data. Go ahead.
Well, so like how much do we allow crowdsourcing of data, of networks, of tags, of all this sort of stuff versus how much do we want to kind of constrain that in different ways? And because going back to the tagging conversation, like you look at social media and how many, tagging is a big part there. Well, how many tags have 10 million uses versus have 200 uses, and so making sure that people are using some more tags and that. So again, like how maybe it's a learning process, maybe there's ways that we work on that, but I think much of the conversation for the last 20 minutes is that's been kind of running through my head as to how do we sort of navigate this, giving people the agency to sort of figure things out, but at the same time that we don't have 114 different tags that have one user or something like that.
Right.
Building on that is some of the discussions around gamifying, in some way incentivizing people, and I don't like that personally. It's just annoying to me.
gaming, you know, the things you get, the number of stars you get or something like that. It's a whole area that they're doing in with websites, but
Just working with what they were doing out of that.
So we only,
little emojis, little emojis.
we don't have very much time left, so we're gonna take a quick break.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about data. So it's 3:22, so if we wanna take about 8 minutes, come back at 3:30.
8 minutes.
8 minutes. Chris will also do all the extras too.
I know, I think
And there's snacks
Yeah,
and,
snacks.
tea, the caffeine booth. Right here.
Restroom is down the hall.
It might be something where. That 4-page by county, here's population profile, demographic profile.
When we were unloading
Yeah.
Profile. Now, I think.
No one knows.
Yeah, marketing around here and stuff like that.
Yeah. That is great. Can you send me?
I kind of like it. What is it? Fort Iowa?
Yeah.
Yeah, Iowa's
Right.
I don't know, they must have, they've got, they've been crazy now. Really good.
I assume they just didn't know because I was new, but
Yeah.
it's amazing
I don't know, the sites, they set up the cameras,
Yeah, that's
watch it,
that's
and
awesome.
detail, and
Yeah.
Well, I think.
yeah, I mean,
quite
it's been
honestly,
going
I
on
think
for as
they
long as I've been here, so I just assumed it was like,
Data of any place in the state, I know. And the
actual
set
walk
reports
building,
they publish.
Yeah, of course you did here.
So what I'm thinking is, like the main website that you can download county reports.
Yeah.
Just wait till January when it's 6 below.
Because they used to have, I haven't been there in a while,
there's no tunnels
they had
here.
all kind, they had a really good retail sales report.
Very good, few.
Yeah.
There's a couple of
They
them.
had, yeah, but they had every kind of, everything you can imagine.
I mean, other universities I've been at have a
Again, like Johnson
pretty good
Which is not to say.
underground. In more northern, universities in more northern climates have
Yeah.
usually pretty good
And
underground.
there are
Yeah,
utilities.
everything's
though, but yeah.
Not like,
Yeah.
There's another tunnel.
Well, they got the Times Dairy.
Yeah.
They've got, yeah, they just, this is always been.
fair enough.
I mean, this is.
Yeah.
We're tough.
Whoa, all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Up
Well, they have
until,
2024.
around
We've been,
1990.
so we used to do those all the time.
Yeah, but not until
So
the
many,
time.
so many, we even did.
They closed in
Multi-year
1889
pyramid,
and 1990.
you
So 3 times as much.
2000.
And now you close the drive away.
Liability.
I was out there so
Liability.
long.
Yeah.
In front of a group of people.
Well, and what we're even driving now that we did.
Yeah.
I use them occasionally.
Yeah. They are,
But these birds don't have snow
you know, I think what you
I
get
the
to
birds,
look
yeah,
at,
I guess when they get around, but
God,
they got in trouble.
I mean, I'm using one to show
They
like.
were, they just
How
how
about workforce gonna take
Yeah.
us well,
the, inclement weather, one of those, snow emergency repairs, they got a clear thing. That the bird, people would send their guys out, clear them out of the way, anyway, I didn't do it.
Those numbers
A
are.
lot of guys think fine.
Yeah, they're-
Money out of that.
I think that's,
Yeah, those things
well, here's
are.
another, to make this.
They,
idea of
when,
using
actually, when we left
generation.
DC, my husband was like,
We talked
man,
about that.
one thing I'm
I
not
mean, that's a-
convinced
Yeah.
I
of,
mean,
damn
I
electric scooters
mostly don't
everywhere.
like it, but
He was
boy, when you're
crushed.
communicating
Oh.
When we got here, and they had, I think they had just arrived the week we got here in August, you know, and Mark was just
in
like,
a way that
gutted.
24-year-olds and when you do that kind of detail age cohort breakout, it just, it's a lot harder to get.
The Lime ones, they pulled out already.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right,
What's
yeah,
going on.
right.
They're all
Yeah, that
gone.
ratio
I don't know if
of
they're gone
millennials to baby boomers,
but there's something else.
pretty darn interesting
Yeah.
statewide.
I'm.
Something else.
Flight, I think it's owned by Uber.
Okay.
Yeah.
Statewide, it's
Fire.
Something like that.
1-to-1 ratio.
But yeah,
well,
well,
if you, but if you start doing like, get out.
Pony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah, you got a 4-letter.
I haven't tried one, I'd probably break my neck.
Always.
No, I couldn't
Yeah,
pay
I mean,
me
that's
for
one of the core sort of demographic indicators.
Yeah.
well, I was hit by a car while riding my bike
Oh.
a long time ago, and I broke my back into 200 feet
It's not there now, it's not like they did.
Yeah, I mean, this is my first year. Not Brooklyn, not LA, not here. Yeah, terrible.
People like you, Jay, everybody wants you, Jay.
And then there was a bicycle in DC right before I left DC that hit a
So
pedestrian and killed
you're
her.
not a millennial? You're close.
I
You gotta
am.
be close.
Yeah,
You gotta
so
be
it can
close.
go both ways. I mean, so like, 'cause that's my thing with
Well,
scooters is I was like,
So,
I could be
Yeah.
killed walking down the
so it's
sidewalk.
really,
Very.
yeah, it's right on the cusp.
I think it was just the way her head hit the,
Oh,
her
really?
head hit the curb, and I think
Telling
she,
the experts.
yeah, it wasn't even that crazy. Like, it wasn't anything like super crazy, but it makes you realize like she was like a reporter for Bloomberg or something. I mean, she was pretty well, relatively well known in Washington.
One thing to point out.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what size.
That baby boomers, baby boomers, that time, same age now.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, you think about like how the world.
Yeah.
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 So baby boomers were, so they were, they entered the workforce, but they were young, 20-something, early 30s.
Why wouldn't you have to stop?
Yeah, right, I can look at
Yeah.
our, movies from my generation.
Baffling to me, and then they have like, you know, people have their.
Oh, yeah, they've got their,
It's just always fascinating to go back and read it. In light of what we have today.
yeah, we had someone killed in DC on one of the scooters like the week that left too.
So we got through
But
two
in
of
DuPont
them so
Circle.
far. Really? But going back and watching those,
I remember
so
moving to
culturally
DuPont Circle.
inappropriate. Like that show would not fly today.
Yeah, I think they were going, I think they were going illegally, like on one of those zebra crossings, when they had the red light not to go. And the scooter and the person got stuck under SUV and dragged like 100 yards or something crazy. Like, I was just like, and that's why I don't ride a scooter. Or that's why I don't ride illegally on a scooter.
You're a big bird rider, right?
I'm told by my doctor, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true.
Mine told me not to
Well, my
even ride
husband
bikes.
knows that, like,
Are you
really
riding
all of
bikes?
those movies,
Not,
there's
I can't
other
do it.
ones too, like,
I rode my horse until I couldn't get off. Like, I couldn't get on.
That seems like much more of a thing than I was thinking. I mean, it's more just.
Well, I felt like the odds
I don't know, they were
falling
sort of comedy adventures. I think you could get away with a lot of that today. It was framed as comedy and flat, yeah.
My OB also lived
You're
through
right.
me.
They are illustrative stuff that, we just thought was so awesome
Right.
and wouldn't see
Maybe he
anything
just they don't write the word.
appropriate.
You didn't ask.
Somebody looking at
I didn't
you.
ask.
What? Well,
But yeah.
this is some of the phrasing.
Yes, you definitely have
The
to.
way that
You're cut off.
Yeah.
How far along are you?
Especially like this year, Whippers was,
Oh.
they would be boycotting.
Oh, yeah,
taking
yeah,
a movie
Carl
like
Lundman,
that.
yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Stuff around like, John Hughes.
Yeah, I couldn't get off my horse like after about like 6
You're
months.
probably
Like, you know, when you swing your leg over, you have to
Yeah.
slide down. I couldn't slide.
I keep running into like doorways and walls. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will get back on the horse, so to speak, and talk about data once my computer runs quickly. So, data. The first thing we'll do is CARES, the data folks will better address than I can, how we plan on prioritizing the data sets. You all gotten this list by email, so this is stuff that we've talked about in
it's
these.
2 pages.
2 pages,
Yep.
sorry.
Thank you. It's a table page and then a single page. Sorry, Melissa.
No problem. As well as we've had a number of people come up to us at the summit, at these RD meetings, at these regional meetings, and in our field studies requesting additional data sets. So you probably have seen that if you look in your email. So before we get too nitty gritty into our little exercise, which is asking you guys to prioritize in a few different categories, I'd like the CARES data folks to sort of talk about well, what are we going to prioritize in 2019? How do we go through that process? What are our important factors? And so Chris addressed it pretty well this morning. I'm not a data person, so I feel like, you
I can
know.
talk about, or you
Okay,
can.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, first off, just to explain the papers you handed out, the staple set is the dead list of data, and the single sheet is the jurisdictions or the sort of the framing that we would use maybe to access the data. That's the two different ways to think about those sheets. Go ahead, Jenny.
Yeah, I'm looking for the email that I sent to you, right? Because I outlined all
Yeah,
of
it was
them.
a great outline.
Let's see here if I can find it. Outlook is failing me once again.
It's in the slides there, too.
Oh, is it? Oh, perfect.
Play around
Oh,
with
yeah,
your notes.
perfect. Oh, good. Thank
You
you.
can drive for everyone.
Perfect.
I don't
Okay.
think I'm the right.
Yeah. So a couple of things that we had talked about, which I think you guys are all pretty aware of these types of things, but just to reiterate, first and foremost, you know, is it collected regularly and by a trusted source? So something where we wouldn't have to do a lot of cleaning. That's not necessarily going to rule it out if we do, but again, just like the free versus paid data, would you still consider it a priority, knowing that it would take us a lot of work or a lot of time on an annual or biannual basis to get it updated?
And also on the quality control on
right.
that, is it from
Correct.
has it been vetted, or is there some
Yep.
sort of quality control description around that data, or is it some of them are here?
Yep. And if it is free, is it easily accessible? Is it something that we can pull dynamically through an API or very easily when new data updates are published? Or is it something where we're going to have a one-on-one relationship with the data source and constant, make sure that we're, you know, periodically asking them to send us the files, those types of things. The next one is it specific to Missouri? So really this is about all things Missouri, and we want to get more local data. So we would prioritize things that are specific to Missouri, while we would welcome national data sets, again, things that are going to be most impactful to our state. What population would it likely positively impact? So are we focused here on youth, elderly, populations in poverty, or different racial groups? We would like to prioritize some of those, again, because those are populations that have been brought up in all of the impact areas. And it is something that we've recognized as a gap in some of our data in terms of, especially things like the elderly population, things related to gerontology, certain racial groups, or gender roles types of groups, those things. So is it useful across all impact areas? Obviously, we're going to probably prioritize those that are going to be useful across all 4 impact areas. And the last one is someone paying us to acquire and integrate it.
Right. So, one of the points is we can leverage other work we're doing at CARES. If we've got a project that's going to be collecting that information anyway, we can likely, as long as it's public data, also drop that data set into Walton, Missouri. Yeah. Or if it's being prioritized by campus leadership.
Right.
Like that, then we have an incentive to include it.
Yeah.
Missouri.
It's also an opportunity for you all to think is, are there programs or projects that you see forthcoming in 2019 where data would need to be acquired, that we could potentially partner with you all to make sure that not only does it meet the needs of that program or project, but it also can be leveraged, like you said, for all things Missouri. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. So what we're asking you to do then is to write down 3 data sets that are most useful to you. So not necessarily thinking about the business and community impact area, but thinking about your role in extension and what's going to be most helpful to you. And then write down also the 3 most useful data sets for a new CES. And this, again, doesn't have to be within the business and community realm, but what would you like somebody who's 2 days on the job, right, to know about business and community that would help them sort of have a good footing starting out working in their communities.
And it's fine if these are data sets that are already on the list.
Yep.
But we're also looking for what we've been. So And the suggestion is 3. We had some people this morning that 10, others did 1, you know. But and where's the notepads go?
Right.
Oh,
Sorry.
There's some notepads and.
If you wanna like rank them 1 to 5
Yeah.
or something like that, that could help. Just can get some that are higher priority and.
I don't know if you can.
Can we put 3 on 1?
Oh, yeah,
three on
we
one.
just make a list here. We're not gonna talk about these necessarily right now. We're gonna collect these and make sure that these things are on our list. So, who wants to explain to Steve what we're doing?
Let's just give him paper and see what he writes down.
Yeah.
All right, I can write.
No, what, do you want to explain, Jane?
Sure, we're doing this exercise here, so 3 data sets that are most useful to you, maybe something that we already have or that's already included in the list, but would be helpful to you as your role in extension, and then 3 sets that you think would be most useful to a new CES person.
And 3 is in quotes.
Yeah.
And we didn't specify in the earlier meeting any guidelines on what we mean by data sets. Some people were specific, like, I need the 1992 unemployment figures. Other people like, give me the BLS data. And, you know, you can be as specific or broad as you need to. And like we said, don't worry what's already on the list. If it's on there and you're saying it, that's fine. If it's not on there and you're saying it, that's fine too.
I think we need the Jeopardy music or something.
Jeopardy music?
Yeah.
Yes, your answer must be in the form of a question.
For you.
And, you know, if there's something that would be so useful for your job and you know it's unattainable, but feel like that's really something you need, go ahead and put that down. And if it becomes available in the future, then we'll have it as a priority. Yeah, Pat can use the whole notepad.
No, I'm just gonna stay within the bounds of the rules.
Did we pass on to this group that the taxation districts, there's an effort to get those collected by the state?
No, I put a
Department of Revenue,
Yeah.
so they're supposed to be digitizing those?
Yes.
Mhm.
In June.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mhm.
have you talked with anyone there?
I'm on the Missouri Gas Advisory Committee, and one of the persons is supposedly responsible for this, and they're like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do with it? They're pretty optimistic right now that they'll be able to collect.
Are they hand digitizing stuff?
They
I mean, how
are,
are they doing it?
How have they not
scanning
done
or
this
what?
already?
right.
Oh, because there's only legal descriptions for a lot of these.
I know, but you just have a student sit there and I've done it.
The ones that
I've
the
done it.
communities that are larger, they're really getting into pre-existing GIS from it.
Yeah.
The smaller communities, yes, they're having to deal with maps or lists of the descriptions.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to do that.
Man,
But they're pretty optimistic.
are they?
Yeah.
Wow. I can't wait to see this.
We'll see what happens in June. Wouldn't be surprised if it creeps a little past June, but I'll find out again next month what's that. I know that was brought up by at least one of our groups. Was it this group? Was asking for that data?
The taxing district?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think every group
did?
talks about
Okay.
taxing districts.
Yeah, I don't know why those are particularly useful though. Like rural fire districts or fire districts in general. I mean, we don't typically do programming around
Well,
special.
there's Letty and all this.
Yeah.
Are
Are there? Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. That's like things like school districts, obviously, which we've got pretty good maps for there.
I think so that you can see, sometimes that you can see disparities, right? If you have a volunteer fire district in one area and you have a county-funded fire district in another area, and you've got people that are dying in the volunteer fire district area, you know, then you kind of know that something's not
Or vice
working.
versa.
Or vice versa. Yes, I'm not hating on volunteer fire districts.
Typically, one from the state wasn't aware of all the fire stations and fire districts, like there's no.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
they don't,
Yeah.
well, so talking to, what was it, Erin McGruder, from the fire and rescue training, she was on our health and safety, impact team, and said that there's just not a one-stop resource for that information, like what hospitals or what fire stations are in my county or district, so.
I thought Homeland Security had that.
Well, maybe they're not
For the
there.
stations, maybe not the districts.
The Homeland Security Information Network is like member only.
Oh, it's restricted information.
Mhm. I mean, the USGS has, like, their structures database has a bunch of that stuff in there, but it's not
It's messy.
very messy. Yep.
You're very uncertain of the feature.
Mhm.
Or what's in there is up to date.
Yeah. Well, you know, in some cases it's not complete, but.
You guys feeling good about that?
Yeah.
Again, this spreadsheet, we sent you the link and the email to the spreadsheet
Mhm.
so that you can go into it and add some things directly to the spreadsheet, or feel free if you think of some things after the meeting to either do that or email us. We've already had some of the ag folks email.
Oh, nice.
I've had 2 emails. You got one, and I had another one from Renee. You can get us information on in the future. We would like, though, to have some of your priority data sets in place in the next, week or two, as we need to move forward with some decision-making process. All right? Let's put the drop dead for that. December.
The report goes out on December 11th, so
Okay.
that's usually before that.
A few days before December 11th. December 7th. They will live in them.
Make people think really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's okay, we expected this from you.
Yeah.
I'm just teasing. No, that's good, that's good.
Amy, we were in Illinois at the same time, so we had an affinity.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
or 10, yeah, I mean. Melissa said we should have said 5, and I said, you're being generous.
I don't know if we had anybody 6 to 3 this morning.
One person did 2.
I did.
Oh.
I'm a rule follower, I'm doing 3.
I
Okay.
did 3, but I,
With subcategories.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the level and the change and the.
Okay.
Well, well, what you do with the data is different.
Right.
Right now, we just get the right data.
Maybe we'll spend another minute kind of getting through this and then.
Yeah,
Wrap
you
up
can
for the
keep
day.
working on it, but we got other side, don't you?
Yeah,
Okay.
but people are thinking, this is great.
Yeah.
I want to take advantage of everybody's time while we're all focused. You look like you're thinking pretty hard down there, Chris.
No.
That'd be,
Flat line.
Nice.
He's thinking about pies, though.
Oh, yeah.
Not me.
I don't know.
Thinking about how I miss Shell Ranch Sugar Day.
Oh, so good.
Mm.
Kind of smells like it. Fresh little aroma.
Oh, my gosh.
We could take a second group tomorrow.
No, we can't.
Right.
Sorry. Do you guys have a meeting within the meeting?
I know, I'm organizing.
Oh,
I was wondering if you were gonna give me an email.
To get stuff not done.
I was like,
Wait,
oh,
I
you
know.
guys did
Yeah.
it. No, because I was entering yesterday.
Your nickname is the Hammer? Your nickname is the Hammer?
Yeah, hammer folder.
Oh, yes.
Wait. Can we come up with like a nice one piece like unitard thing you can wear, like a real wrestler?
Gotta market cares, right?
Christmas.
Cares, you.
You come in swinging the folding chair.
Carl's different suit and his roof suit. I think that's
Christmas,
what.
I was.
Well, seems like an appropriate time to start wrapping it up for today. The last thing we have to talk about, or we'd like to talk about with you all, is basically how to keep this rolling in the right direction in 2019 and hopefully beyond. And the first, it's not necessarily an ask, but we need to consider a governance group, not just for, data specific things, but the direction we're going in as a whole. Did you want to speak to that, or?
Sure. I met with Blake a couple of weeks ago about where we're at with the All Things Missouri process, and it's been really great as we've gone through this exercise 3 times with the 4 groups. And we want to keep that going into next year and subsequent years. So transitioning this team here that we have into a governance framework, who wants to remain in, who does not want to continue in this role, because we need curators in some ways for each of the impact areas. And there's always going to be new data, new tools. CARES is developing stuff outside of extension that may benefit extension. So we need some guidance from a governance group for each of the impact areas. Thoughts about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
One of the things we're maybe anticipating that maybe wouldn't be as intensive as it's been the past few weeks with these 3 long meetings, like shorter meetings or less frequent or something like that. We wouldn't have you write down 3 top data stats. But definitely, and we might handle more things by email or something too, because we think that there will be frequent questions that we might have to send out, or we'll need feedback on a tool or where we're headed or something like that.
Or this is what we're ready to pilot. It's March 2019.
Right.
Getting feedback on what's going to be out there or what is out there.
And also hearing from you all, what is the field saying? Are we missing something? Do we need to further refine what we're doing? And so it's going to be an ongoing process. That's exciting because we've got that, we've got the linkages in place.
There's something else that, it's very important that, as we don't want to have 2 people sitting out there commiserating about how they don't have this thing on CARES. If you're hearing that, if you look at that as an opportunity to provide some feedback through.
I haven't heard anything negative from anybody.
Well, I'm sure we're going to have opportunities for improvement.
Have you heard anything positive?
I mean, I think that's a good sign, because extension folks are not bashful about it.
I'll let you know, Bill.
Good.
So
I
that's,
hear that. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's a good sign.
So we've talked about this morning about setting up some webinars for, as soon as we've got something developed. Again, our timeline is December 11th. We put together our kind of report and potential scope, and then we do some builds over the next year. And as we have these new things ready, it'd be great to have some one-on-one testing, but also some broader extension-based webinars, trainings, and so on and so forth. So we'll definitely keep in communication about that, as well as having the more intimate feedback.
Yeah, and one thing that, one idea that I think we're pretty excited about at this point is like a monthly webinar, a Zoom conference where we say, okay, here's something new, or here's how you use this. Maybe not something as intensive as like, here's how you upload data responsibly, but, additionally, a way to connect with CESs, and hopefully there's power users like, hey, you know, Michelle made this awesome report, let's talk about it. Michelle, how did you do this? So connecting and also pushing out new information and new features.
So really, the more important is connecting with the regional.
Yeah.
Clearly,
Yeah.
we've been meeting with them.
And if they don't see it as a priority, then CES.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think some feedback that we've had from the RDs has been, it's been very positive.
Yeah.
They love this brown bag lunch idea.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all about it.
Food's good, they'll leave.
Right. And we've visited what 5 of the 7 regions thus far to do just some baseline training on all things Missouri. And, you know, I think one thing that we're committed to is going back and doing deeper dives and doing data upload training and those kinds of things as we build these things out. So,
And using it as
Yeah.
a feedback loop. too.
correct, absolutely.
That's very important
Mhm.
because
Right.
things change.
Yep.
There's going to be new priorities for Missouri as we move forward, and we need to stay on top of that.
So if we could, for each of the impact teams, Jamie, if you can send an email out to the group, and if we do not hear back from you, that we assume that you're going to stay on as part of the governance group.
That's tricky.
Like how I spun that around,
Yeah.
because people are so busy, this will get buried, and therefore you're in the group. But the other thing is helping us understand who we're missing.
Right. Yeah.
That's going to be important, is who else needs to be part of a governance group that's not at the table now? And that will come from each of the leads to the respective.
And
I would try to get at least one regional director on each. I would try to get at least one of the regional directors on each.
They're technically on those lists, aren't they?
Yeah,
We have
so
somebody from every
Michael-
group. Yeah.
Michael is on this group. Michael Crouch. Yeah, Crouch. Yeah. Yeah, he's on this group. Joe Lear is on
Yeah.
ag, and
He's been,
is there
I think,
one?
all of them.
He's been
Blake
very
is supposed to be on health and safety. Is that right?
Who did we have? We had
Well,
Wayne.
we need to meet with the RDs face to face and just explain the same thing,
Yeah.
we'd like a presence of the RDs on each of the impacts. somebody
Yeah.
representative.
And are we actually hiring Will Carroll as our spokesman?
Oh,
I hope
Sure.
so. That'd be great. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anybody from business development on this group?
There you are, he's great.
You?
I'm on workforce development. So.
It worked.
Is there anybody from business development on this group?
Looks like it did.
The business
From-
development, I'm sorry.
Anybody from the business development program?
I can tell you who is all on our invite
Yeah.
for these
I haven't
meetings. So we have, let's see, Michelle Kroll, Catherine Nooner, Claire Wolf, Darla Campbell, Travis Shelton, all right? David Steffes,
Okay.
Daniel Cash, John Gulick, Gerardo Martinez, Pat Curry, Connie Burnham, Rob Russell, Elizabeth Smith, Steve Janetta, Stephen Hennis, Joanna Reed Adams, and Sarah Love.
I would add Michael.
Mike Allen?
So what will be good is
The
the
data guy over in the meeting. Can you send an email to?
Yeah, so, well, before, yes, if you could include for each of the leads, it's just a list of names in the email so they can say, oh, I know who's now part of the team, because some couldn't make it very often at all. So have a list of all the names and then email back with this.
They have a ton of different data sets, they buy, went to them, Mike basically takes care of all that stuff.
What was his last name?
Adams.
I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you.
He'll probably,
What's that?
he'll probably be thankful.
He's a good director, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all very,
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
It's been a
Yeah,
wonderful
sure.
process.
The whole
At least for
process.
us. Yep.
Awesome, thank you.
Very
Yeah, I'll
good.
collect your sheets here if you're ready to give them up.
And
You ready to give these up?
Yes.
Go ahead and
Okay.
email some more ideas if you have them later. Yeah.
Questions or
Thank
concerns?
you.
Thank you.
You mentioned them first.
Yeah, Melissa is helping us
Nothing
get
better.
our
Nothing
plan of
better.
all this work we need to do, and then she's gonna leave us in
Yeah.
January. And we're all gonna be left with the work.
Good timing.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'll still have the hardest work of all.
Oh, yeah, she'll come back and clean up.
That's what I was thinking. I was like,
Yeah, I still have the
I
hardest work
couldn't
of
wait to
all.
come back to work. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I gotta get away from this thing for 10 hours.
members.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Such a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lucy and baby are gonna be like showing up at your doorstep, at your office, that's like begging, what do I do?
No, he'll rock it.
With my daughter.
Especially the day after
My wife.
school was
Yeah,
out.
and Saturday, but I should be sure we